I'm a hardcore boxing fan. I've been watching boxing since the 80s. I used to watch literally every single boxing match I could possibly find on any channel, even the most obscure fights. So I know a lot of even journeymen from the 80s and 90s and stuff like that because I used to watch everything and tape everything. I had boxes and boxes and boxes full of VHS tapes of just random fights I was tape from the television. I used to check CFAX and Teletext every single day for boxing news because this was before the days of the internet. I used to buy every single boxing publication there was religiously, without fail. KO Magazine, Ring Magazine, Boxing Illustrated, Sports Illustrated, Boxing Monthly, Boxing News. I even used to buy that limited edition boxing magazine series which came out with the VHS tape strapped to the front. I think it was called Boxers. I used to buy that as well. I used to buy every boxing book I could find. And I was also a boxing amateur myself. So I am the epitome of a hardcore boxing fan. My hardcore boxing fan credentials are certified. I'm certi. I'm certified out here in terms of being a hardcore boxing fan. But what differentiates me from a lot of other hardcore boxing fans is that I can see the bigger picture. A lot of hardcore boxing fans end up getting a snobbish attitude about boxing. They get a snobbish attitude towards casual fans. Now, obviously, casual fans don't have the knowledge that us hardcore boxing fans have, but their views on boxing in terms of which fights and which fighters they find entertaining are very important because it's obvious that without casual boxing fans, most of these guys like Mayweather, Pacquiao, Cotto, all the big guys in boxing, they wouldn't be able to make any money without the casual fans. The casual fans made those guys rich. If it was only us hardcore fans watching the sport, then these guys wouldn't be earning a fraction of what they're earning. So it's no good when a casual fan says Mayweather Pacquiao was a boring fight. It's no good turning around and saying, oh, fuck you, you casual. Fuck you, you don't know what you were watching. It's no good saying that. Because if you enjoy a technical fight like that, that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. If you enjoy watching Floyd Mayweather and you think, you enjoy watching his technical skills and all that kind of stuff and you don't care about seeing knockouts or anything, there's nothing wrong with that. But understand that is an acquired taste. Like for me, I was a big fan of underground, hardcore New York hip hop back in the 90s. And there's certain music, certain artists who I like from that era, which most other people wouldn't like because it's an acquired taste. It's a niche market. And I understand that. I don't have any problem with people not liking some obscure little New York underground rap group. I don't have no problem with them not liking that group the same as me because I understand that it's an acquired taste. And that's what a lot of hardcore fans need to understand, that these technical fighters, Hopkins, Ward, Mayweather, these guys who don't go above and beyond to try and entertain, who play it safety first, there's nothing wrong with liking them, but it's an acquired taste, and don't get mad at people who don't enjoy watching them fight. And a lot of people, and I'm not talking about the fanboys here, because there are fanboys of certain fighters like Floyd fanboys who are going to defend him no matter what. And they're not even hardcore fans. They're just fanboys. It don't matter any tiny critical thing you say about Floyd, no matter if it's you say his fight is boring or criticize something he did out the ring or something he said, they're going to attack you anyway because they're like little Justin Bieber fans. They're just fanboys. I'm really addressing the hardcore boxing fans who get a bit snobbish. And one of the things that these hardcore boxing fans will sometimes say is, well, how can you expect a fighter to go out there and put himself at risk? If he can do it with the sweet science and beautiful technical boxing, then you should be applauding him for doing that. We shouldn't be applauding fighters who go out there and get hit and end up with brain damage. But that's not what I'm applauding, because go back and look at Muhammad Ali in his prime. He was hardly getting hit. Go back and look at Roy Jones Jr. in his prime. He was hardly getting hit. Go back and look at Mike Tyson in his prime. He was hardly getting hit. But as well as hardly getting hit, those guys were putting on a show. It wasn't just enough to win a fight. They had to look spectacular. They had to leave those casual fans with something they would never forget. And that's something that Mike Tyson's mentor and original trainer, Cus D'Amato, instilled in all of his fighters. In fact, he designed his boxing style, his boxing system. He designed it to be that way. He designed it so it would be exciting. He always told his fighters, it's not just enough to win. You have to be exciting. You have to entertain the fans and give them something spectacular. And if you do that, people will come to watch you. So Mayweather, the Mayweather era, the technical fighters out there, it's detrimental to boxing for these guys to be hyped up the way they are, not only by their fan bases, but also by the media and what have you, because the casual fans then watch a Mayweather fight and they're bitterly disappointed. And many of them, and I've been contacted by friends that I know who are casual boxing fans over the past 24 hours, and they've told me how disappointed they were in Mayweather Pacquiao. These are people who don't normally watch boxing. And they said they were very disappointed and they're probably not going to watch boxing again because some of them had gone out to sports bars or whatever and paid to see the fight. And they were very, very disappointed, felt like it was a waste of time, waste of money, and that boxing is just not for them. Whereas if they was around in the 90s and, the fights which were getting hyped up at the time, like, for example, Nigel Benn, Gerald McClellan, they wouldn't have been disappointed. Even a Roy Jones Jr. fight. If they would have seen Roy Jones against Vinny Paz, they wouldn't have been disappointed. They would have been amazed. If they'd seen Mike Tyson against Pinklon Thomas, they would have been amazed. So we need to champion fighters who are willing to go above and beyond. And I'm all for fighters getting paid. I want fighters to get paid. Okay? But if we want the sport of boxing to get back to its glory days, and believe you me, people, boxing is not in its glory days. Some people would have you believe because Mayweather's doing certain pay-per-view numbers that boxing is better than it's ever been. No, absolute bullshit. Yes, Mayweather has broken numbers in terms of purses and stuff like that, but that's because, for one, of the pay-per-view model, and also because of inflation. Because in terms of, if you take boxing as a whole, purses in boxing proportionate to the value of currency have actually gone down. They haven't been going up, they've been going down. Today, in boxing, financially, it's much more top heavy than it's ever been before. And what I mean by top heavy is you've got a few marquee names at the top of boxing who are making all the money and everyone else is making fuck all. Whereas back in the days, the top guys were making a lot of money, but the bottom guys were also doing quite well as well. The lower paid fighters. I mean, the ones who weren't getting ripped off by their management, right? But I'll give you a quick example. Even back in the 60s, obviously I wasn't around then, but back in the 60s, you had guys in the UK like Henry Cooper. Henry Cooper wasn't a world-class fighter, but he was a household name in the UK. He attracted big crowds in the UK. And he wasn't just making money from the purses in his fights. He was also making money from sponsorships and advertising and stuff like that because he was a household name. Because back then, boxing was bigger than it is now. Even the little, smaller guys could, get a slice of the cake. The less talented guys. Because boxing back then was on terrestrial television. And obviously, a big reason why boxing has become a niche sport now, it's not a mainstream sport anymore. The main reason was, and the thing that started it all off, was because promoters and TV companies got greedy and introduced pay-per-view. And slowly but surely, a lot of the casual fans fell away from just even watching normal domestic level fights. And so the relative purses of lower tier fighters started declining because not as much people were watching them. Back in the days when you'd have a big fight card, even the domestic level fighters would be exposed to millions and millions and millions of fans watching on television. Nigel Benn, Gerald McClellan, I think that did 17 million. That had 17 million viewers on ITV, and that's in the UK. You're not ever going to get, or none of Mayweather fights have been that much because it's all on pay-per-view. Whereas 17 million, the guys on the undercard, whoever they were, Frank Bruno wasn't on the undercard of McClellan against Ben, I don't think, was he? I can't even remember now. I don't think he was. No, he wasn't. I think he fought the week before against Rodolfo Marin, if my memory serves me correctly. But anyway, Pay-per-view has hurt boxing. That has made it a niche sport. It's made it more top heavy, so only the top few pay-per-view fighters can make some money. Everyone else is getting fucked over or getting very little money because no one knows them. Fans don't see them. They're not getting sponsorships, all that kind of stuff. So the thing that Al Heyman is doing with putting fights back on terrestrial TV is good, and that will help. But what we also need is for the big fights to deliver in terms of excitement. So we need to be promoting fighters who are willing to go above and beyond and put a show on for the fans. You know, we need another Roy Jones. We need another Mike Tyson. And I'm talking about them guys in their prime, because some idiots are going to, oh, Roy Jones is getting knocked out and Tyson's getting knocked out. I'm not talking about when they're over the hill. I'm talking about in their primes. We need another guy who's like a prime Jones, a prime Tyson, a Ray Leonard, guys who are going to go out there and not just dominate a guy, but close the show. That's what we need. So hardcore boxing guys, you need to take a step back and look at the entire forest. That's what you need to do, because some of you guys can't see the forest for the trees. Take a step back and look at the whole forest. You know, the guys lower down in boxing are not getting paid what they used to get paid proportionately, because obviously $1 now is, or $1 or £1 now is not worth, as much as it was 20, 30 years ago. You could buy a lot more with $1 or £1 back then than you can now. So we're talking about proportionate earnings relative to the value of a currency were higher, generally speaking, in boxing back in the days than they are today, because of the fact that boxing was getting exposed to a much bigger audience back in the days, generally. Okay, I'm not talking about the odd pay-per-view fight here and there where Mayweather does this worldwide or whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about generally. And even in terms of Mayweather's or Pacquiao's overall viewing figures, you have to also take into account the fact that the world's population is growing. So if a sport of boxing was doing well, then you would expect the viewing figures in boxing to grow in line with the increase in world population, or the increase in the population of America or Britain or wherever. That's what you'd expect to see. If the sport was doing well, it would have to grow at least in the line of along with the increase in population. And really, it should be growing faster than the increase in population. But no, that's not what's happening. Boxing is behind, and it is declining. It's becoming more and more niche. Floyd Mayweather is a guy who, he's been in a unique position. And this is probably, boxing has always had kind of tribalism. It's always had a situation where certain people will gravitate towards certain fighters because they share the same ethnicity or the same nationality or whatever the case may be. But Floyd Mayweather himself is in a particularly privileged position, in a unique position, because he's a guy who doesn't go above and beyond. I mean, I'm not totally criticizing Floyd for that. He does have bad hands at the end of the day. Maybe if he didn't have those bad hands, he would try and be a bit more conclusive in his fights and dominate more thoroughly and close the show like he did with Arturo Gatti and Diego Corrales back in the days. But nonetheless, since them times when he's developed these serious hand problems, he's not closing the show, and most of his fights are boring, if in all honesty. Yes, he's technical and I can appreciate all the technical stuff he does. I'm a hardcore fan. But in all reality, his fights, most of Floyd's fights, I would never want to watch more than once. I watch them live, and a very few of them will I ever go back and watch again. But Mike Tyson fights, I go watch them countless times. Roy Jones Jr. fights, I watch them countless times. Same with Sugar Ray Leonard and a lot of his fights. But despite the fact that Floyd is not entertaining to watch, I know the fanboys, I don't even want to hear from you fanboys. You're going to, if Floyd, just went in the ring and threw one jab around, you'd think it was the most exhilarating thing you've ever seen. You'd be fucking ejaculating all over the room. For him throwing one jab around, and you think that's amazing. But anyway, Floyd's in a position where, because boxing is no longer black dominated, he has got a virtual monopoly over the black boxing fans, with the black boxing fans. If Floyd had been around in the Hagler, Hearns, Leonard era, where Mike Tyson was there, and there was so many black fighters, Aaron Pryor, if he was around in that era, he wouldn't have had the entire or 85% of the black boxing fans behind him. It would have been a lot more fractured. There would have been the Hagler supporters, then there would have been the Hearns guys, there would have been the Leonard guys, and then there would be the Mayweather guys, there would be the Pryor guys. It would be a lot more fractured. So Floyd wouldn't be able to earn the kind of money he's earning now. So he's actually in a fortunate position with the fact that there's very few black fighters now who are household names anymore, because the black American fighter in general has actually declined. So I know you've got Andre Ward, but Andre Ward's not a household name. You know, most black people worldwide who are boxing fans, all they know is Mayweather, and some of them all know Broner, and that's about it now. You know, so Floyd is in a blessed position financially where he's got at least 85% of the black boxing fans behind him, and most of those are casual fans, obviously. Most boxing fans in general who watch the mega fights are casual fans. They're not hardcore guys like us. They're casual fans. So it is what it is. I'm happy now, to be honest with you, that the Mayweather era is about to end, because I want to see, as I keep saying and reiterating, I want to see boxing return to the glory days. I'm happy with what Al Heyman's doing. And I want to see the next dominant champion in boxing be someone who is going to bring boxing back to the glory days by going above and beyond the Call of Duty to entertain the fans and give people spectacular fights, spectacular finishes, spectacular knockouts. You know, even, you know, you look at guys like Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, Roy Jones Jr., they also did a lot of showboating. Even Prince Nassim, they did showboating. And I know showboating is not, you know, it's not for everyone. But me personally, I like a bit of showboating. I think that also adds to the fun of a lot of fights. As long as you're fighting good, you know, there's no point in fighting shit and showboating. But if you're fighting well and you add a bit of showboating to it as well, like Roy Jones Jr., you know, there's been fights where he's there with both his arms behind his back, and then the guy comes to punch him, and then he's so fast he'll land the right hand and knock the guy down. Stuff like that. You know, this is the kind of thing that entertains fans. So this is what we need, man. We need the next era, the post-Mayweather era, to be an entertaining era, so we can bring boxing back to the glory days. So even the lower level fighters can get more recognition. Even the lower level fighters can actually earn some money. Because if you compare boxing, for example, to football, what in America you would inexplicably call soccer, right? Football. In the lower leagues in football, people still earn good money. I mean, comparative to boxing, they still earn good money. You look at a third division football club, you know, a lot of the players are earning like a few grand a week. They're earning decent money. But you look at lower boxers, they ain't earning that kind of money. Lower level fight, they ain't earning nowhere near that. So we need to bring it back to that. These guys are risking their lives. They're risking their health. They need to be adequately compensated for that, people. So let's get boxing back to where it was, and let's start championing fighters and championing fights which are actually going to deliver on the hype. You know, so many of you guys bought into the hype of Mayweather Pacquiao when people like me were telling you, look, this fight is not even going to be great. The likelihood is it's going to be a boring fight, people. And you laughed at me when I was saying that Joshua Dillian White is going to be I'm telling you right now, that's going to be a good fight. That fight is going to be way more entertaining than Mayweather Pacquiao. It's so obvious. Two young guys, two guys who are raw. They haven't perfected their technique. Aggressive guys. They're both from London. They got beef. Come on now. It's so obvious that's going to be a good fight. It's like when Billy Joe Saunders, Chris Eubank was about to happen. Some people on Facebook were telling me, I bet it's going to be a shit fight. I said, it ain't going to be a shit fight. Two young guys like that, aggressive, you know, something to prove, both in their like mid-20s. Nah, man, them fights are never shit. When you've got two, you know, outspoken, young, red-blooded type of guys like that, those fights are usually where you get the classics. I mean, you know, Saunders Eubank wasn't really a classic, but those are the ingredients that you need to have a really, really good fight. When you get young guys who got something to prove, who haven't really perfected their techniques yet, that's when you get a fight to remember. So, and the other fights I talked about with Beterbiev and Kovalev Stevenson. In fact, if you look at Beterbiev Kovalev, as good as that fight is, two big punches, I think that fight would be more likely to go the distance than either one of those guys fighting Stevenson, because I can't see any way that Stevenson can last 12 rounds with pressure against either of those guys. Stevenson would know that this is a kill or be killed situation, figuratively speaking. It's either me or him. Stevenson would have to know that, because I can't see him surviving 12 rounds of pressure from Kovalev or Beterbiev. So he would either have to take one of those guys out with a big left hand, or he'd get taken out. I can't see how Stevenson against either one of those guys would not end up in a spectacular, dramatic fight. So you have to forget about the names, people. Forget about the fact that Pacquiao and Mayweather are the biggest names. The biggest names don't necessarily mean it's going to be the best fight, particularly when Mayweather's involved. He's a very conservative fighter. He's got bad hands. He's not going to go above and beyond. He's going to nullify the other guy's offense, make it damn near impossible for the other guy to hit him with anything clean. And then he's just going to do just enough to win each round, peck and poke, and take a 12-round decision. That's what Mayweather does. So let's not hype his fights up to be something spectacular. When Mayweather goes in there, if he does go in there with someone who is genuinely a serious threat to him, I'll be the first one to come out and say, and I'm telling you right, these fights are probably not going to happen, but I'm telling you right now, people can laugh all they want, but styles make fights. Okay? Marcus McDonough ended up giving Floyd a better fight than Manny Pacquiao, but yeah, Manny Pacquiao really is a better fighter than Marcus McDonough. Okay, styles make fights. And I'm telling you right now, Demetrius Andrade, who's 6'1", who has a much longer reach than Floyd, who is a slick southpaw, who can punch, who's very good at using he's stylistically, he's similar to Mayweather. Not quite as good or slick, but similar stylistically. Likes to fight at range and pot shot and all that kind of stuff. Lets his hands go a little bit more, has more power. 6'1". I'm telling you right now, if that fight ever happened, I'm picking Andrade. Not because Andrade is better pound for pound than Mayweather. He's not. But he's so big, he's so tall, his arms are so long, and he's very good at using those arms. I just think that would be a step too far for Floyd. I don't see him being able to get close enough with his shots on Andrade. I think Andrade would just keep him on the end of his shots, and he'd beat Floyd. And I think Andrade would beat guys like Keith Thurman and probably most of the guys at 147. I think he's just too tall and too long for them. You know, I definitely think Andrade had beat Pacquiao as well. Definitely. No question. But again, he's a 6'1", long-armed, hard-punching light middleweight. People are going to say, oh, he got dropped by Martirosyan. Shit, styles make fights, people. You know, you still beat Martirosyan anyway. I'm kind of rambling in this video, but the other guy who I think wouldn't have as good a chance as Andrade has beaten Floyd, but I still think he'd be far more competitive against Floyd than Canelo or Pacquiao or Miguel Cotto, and that would be Erislandy Lara. I think he'd be more competitive than those guys against Floyd, definitely. And I give him a decent chance of beating Floyd too. As far as Keith Thurman, I think Thurman is stylistically not as dangerous for Floyd as the other two guys I mentioned, but still with his athleticism and youth, he could make it interesting. He might be able to make it interesting, but he still had to cope with. He'll still have to cope with those long arms of Floyd. Floyd's got much longer arms than Thurman. He's very accurate, as we know. He's still very sharp, even at his age. He can move very well. Defense is sublime. So I don't know. If someone's going to give Floyd problems, I think they're basically going to have to force him to come forward. And the only way to force him to come forward is with excessive movement, or if you've got a much longer reach than him and you know how to use that reach and keep him on the end of your shots. Okay, Floyd's never fought a top-level guy with a longer reach than him that can keep him at the end of his shots. He's never fought anyone like that. Oscar De La Hoya, when I say reach, I really mean arm length. Oscar De La Hoya had shorter arms than Floyd. Diego Corrales had shorter arms than Floyd. Everyone, pretty much every top guy that Floyd has fought has had shorter arms than him, if you look at the arm length. You know, and Floyd maximizes his arm length very well. It's one of his best tools. If you take his arm length away from him, how does Floyd cut off the ring? How does Floyd get close to a guy who's keeping him on the end of a jab? You know, I don't think he can do that. I think he's been fighting a certain way for so long in his career. I can't see him adapting at this age to be able to get to a Demetrius Andrade. I don't see it. I don't see it. People are going to call me crazy, say this, that, and the other. They think because he beat Pacquiao, he can beat every southpaw in the world from, 154 on down. No, I never bought into the Pacquiao hype. I always felt that he beat Pacquiao comfortably, convincingly, and that's exactly what happened. I've never picked against Mayweather, because this is another thing that some people say. They say, oh, now you're saying Andrade can beat Floyd. People have been saying this about Floyd for ages. Every time a new opponent comes up, they say, oh, this guy's the one to beat Floyd. Not me. That statement don't apply to me, because I've never picked Floyd to lose. Ever. All right. So forget about what them other people are saying. They think Canelo's going to beat him, or Madonna's going to beat him, or Pacquiao. I didn't pick any of them guys to beat Floyd. But what I'm telling you now is, if the Andrade fight comes off, I mean, it won't, but if it ever did, by some miracle, if Floyd came back out of retirement, whatever tax problems, I'm picking Andrade to beat him right off the bat. And Erislandy Lara would be very, very tough for him as well. I remember when Austin Trout was about to fight Miguel Cotto, and people were saying, oh, Cotto destroyed Trout. Trout's no good, blah, blah, blah. Couldn't even beat Canelo convincingly. Some people felt he beat Canelo, but, whatever. But then he went to fight. The Cotto fight was before the Trout fight. Yeah, what am I talking about? The Cotto fight was before the Trout fight. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was, wasn't it? Was it before the Trout fight? Shit, I can't even remember now. But either way, when Cotto was going to fight Trout, people were saying that Cotto was just going to walk through Trout, because Cotto was the name. But I don't buy into names. I look at the styles. And I looked at Trout's style, and I was like, he ain't that good, but I think he'll beat Cotto. And people were like, oh, Hatman, you're crazy. They're telling me on Facebook you're crazy. And I was like, no, man, that style, I don't know, man. Cotto is not a legitimate light middleweight. Trout is. He's a slick southpaw. I think he's got a very good chance of beating Miguel Cotto when it happened. Because people get caught up in the name and they're not looking at the style. Look at the style, people. Look at the attributes. That's how you need to weigh fights up. Anyway, I've been rambling for way too long. This is like a 30-minute video. I'm trying to do my best Richard Dwyer impression right now. Big up Dwyer, by the way. Shout out to the godfather of YTBC, Richard Dwyer. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.